Hello and welcome back to For the Good of the Game. My name is John Davis, JD, your host, and we have a really special day here on the podcast as we welcome in three coaches to the show who have a combined experience of over 110 years in the coaching business, just absolutely phenomenal, all the way from high school up through the NFL. And we'll dive into the relationship piece of this in just a second. But first, I want to cover some of the highlights from each of these gentlemen. And trust me, I could spend an entire episode talking about their exploits, if you will. Coach Craig Rigsbee just retired after 37 years serving at Butte College in California, including 16 years as the football head coach. After a standout career playing at Benicia High School, Hartnell College, and Utah State, he was hired by then AD Mike Liddell to be a part-time O-line coach at the ripe old age of 24. Now, his life during his life at Butte, regardless of his position, Coach Rigsbee has centered on leading and assisting young athletes to success both on and off the field. Among the notable success stories that began at Butte College include today's starting quarterback for the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, and longtime offensive lineman and NFL Hall of Famer for the Dallas Cowboys, Larry Allen. Coach Bill Laveroni played center and was a starter for 3 years at Cal and has over 40 plus years of coaching experience from high school all the way through the NFL. He actually started back at his alma mater for a while, was at Utah State, which we'll talk about, Cal, San Jose State, and Rutgers University, among some, and then was the assistant O-line coach and offensive line coach for the Seattle Seahawks for 6 years, during which time he coached Pro Bowler Steve Hutchinson, Walter Jones, and Robbie Tobeck as they cleared the way for Sean Alexander to set two consecutive rushing records for the team in 04 and 05. Coach Terry Shea played quarterback at Oregon in the mid-'60s. He started as a GA in his coaching career back at his alma mater. He has been to multiple stops in the college level as both an assistant coach, offensive coordinator, and head coach, to include head coach at San Jose State and Rutgers University, and also has 8 years coaching with 5 different teams in the NFL. During his college tenure, Coach Shea was the two-time Big West championship coach in 90 and 91. He was the Big West Coach of the Year in 1990. And then at Rutgers, he was the Big East Coach of the Year in 1998. So it is with distinct pleasure and pride that we welcome you three gentlemen to the show today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
I'm gonna go back and kind of start this and kind of let you guys run with it, just so our audience understands. Coach Lav and Coach Shea were both at Utah State. Coach Shea was there as an assistant coach. Coach Lav was coaching linebackers and O-line during the period of time that Coach Rigsbee was a player at Utah State. And that's kind of, I guess, what started this whole twisted relationship between the three of you guys that's lasted this long through the years. So, Craig, if you could, just to start out, since you were the youngster of the group at that point, kind of to recap what you saw when you came into Utah State at that point.
Well, you know, it was very interesting that at the time, Coach Shea recruited me out of Hartnell Community College. He probably, I don't even know if he remembers this, but he came out and watched me and talked to me. And so my brother was already playing at Utah State at the time. So I was a pretty easy sell. I'd been up there the year before, but I went there, and I'll never forget when I was coming into the dorms, Coach Laveroni was just moving in the dorms because our other coach, he finally got to get out of there. And so Coach Lav had to come in the dorm with his wife, and I actually helped them move into the dorms. And so that, and Coach Lav was going to coach my position. And so that kind of got us off on the right foot. And I was a JC guy coming in with a bunch of other guys. And what I didn't know at the time, but just how fortunate that I was that we really had an all-star line of coaches. Coach Rod Marinelli was the guy moving out, and he's done a great things. You know, we had Bruce Snyder was our head coach. We had all these coaches. Coach Gilbert, Coach Keith Gilbertson was the other offensive line coach. And we had Denny Schuler was a defensive coordinator. We had Kent Bear was a young linebacker coach and did some great things. You know, we had Mike Waffle was a GA, and he ended up being a great defensive line coach for a number of years in the NFL and Division I. So I was very fortunate to be around, and those guys were all really young at the time. I was 19 when I got there. I think Lav was 31, and they were all in their 30s, and they were a very young group. And so it was very fortunate for me that all the things that I got to learn and all the help that I got from those guys to be able to go there and be able to do what I wanted to do, and that was become a football coach.
Coach Lav, what was it like living in the dorm with those guys back then? That must have been crazy.
You know, John, that was my first full-time coaching position. I made, the salary was $14,000 a year. We lived in the apartment in the all football dormitory, and we had we could go to the cafeteria and have 3 square meals a day, so that was all part of the position. But I was obviously excited to have my first full-time college coaching position, and surrounded by Riggs made a great point. I knew right away that Riggs was going to be really a good player and even a better coach, because he absorbed everything. You said every time you coached him, he was listening and he totally paid attention. And so I knew that down the road he was going to be the same way when he became a coach. But Lund Hall, which is no longer there anymore, when they tore the building down, the skeletons, they buried most of the skeletons in the back behind the dormitory. So
absolutely. Coach Shea, that must have been a pretty enjoyable experience. And I know, I think for anybody that plays Division I football, and I did not, I played NAIA football in college, but for anybody that plays Division I football, there's a variety. My experience is there's a whole variety of things that they absorb, particularly for guys that go into the coaching, profession. What do you remember from that experience with these guys starting out, at Utah State in that capacity as an assistant with that all-star crew of coaches?
Well, I really believe that Riggs touched on it earlier, and that is the recruiting part of it. When you're young and you don't know a lot, and our program was off the map. We were an independent in those days, not even a member of a conference until several years later. So our recruiting efforts were really challenged, and we had to sell the store to get guys to even understand where Logan, Utah was, and then to come up and play for us at Utah State. But we just what we were able to capture were a bunch of players that loved the game. And they didn't come to Utah State because we had a great tradition in terms of a conference or anything along those lines. I can remember growing up in the Bay Area and recruiting Riggs right there at Hartnell Junior College. And he played for a very tough-minded, hard-nosed, intense coach. And he took me aside and says, if you get Riggs to come up to Utah State, he'll probably be a coach someday. He's that kind of a player. So those were the kinds of things that I think Coach Lav and I grew up on, is to coach at Utah State at that time and at that place and in that era was a tremendous challenge to your recruiting ability. And I think that's why so many of the coaches who coached in that program went on to become really solid college coaches, because we learned how to recruit.
Do you think that, when you start in an environment like that, and I don't know what kind of culture, good, bad, or indifferent existed when you guys got there, but do you think that starting in that environment and with those struggles Coach Shea just spoke of kind of prepares you better as you move up the chain in terms of how those relationships allow you to grow your huddle, as it were, as a professional, and to really understand how positive culture contributes? Coach Lav, if you would start off.
Well, there's no doubt about that, John. I learned so much. Bruce Snyder was an excellent head football coach, and really we were a group of young assistants, and through his direction, we learned so much. I can remember spending hours just on when we were going to visit a group of potential recruits from, say, California and the Los Angeles area and the Bay Area. We would spend hours talking about the whole weekend and talking about the players and talking about, as Coach Shea said, we had limitations, so we couldn't fly them directly into Logan, Utah, because there was just such small airports. So we would fly them into Salt Lake City. And then they said, well, what are we going to do between the drive from Salt Lake City to Logan, Utah, which is about, I can't remember exactly, maybe an hour drive. Maybe it's longer than that. We actually we had a van, then we would say, okay, we're going to get in the van. all of us, all the recruiting coaches and the players, and we would talk to them as we're driving. We're trying to keep their attention and not looking at all the snow and we were outdoors. I mean, here's some kids from inner city LA, and they've never been outside of the state of California, and we had to create an environment where they say, yeah, I can play football here. And so, like Terry said, there was a lot of discussions on the details of things, not just, okay, we'll fly them in and bring them up to Logan, Utah, and let them go. So that, to me, that was really, for me personally, it was a real eye opener, and I really learned a lot from that, because when you go to another program, you go to a Pac-12 program or something, you don't have to worry about some of the stuff that we had to worry about, getting those recruits up from California and buying into our place at Utah State.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Coach Shea, when you think back compared to, starting out on the West Coast and, at the smaller school, and then working the way up to San Jose State and then to Cal, and ultimately ended up at Rutgers. When you look back at that whole West Coast mentality and the athletes out there versus what you experienced in the Big East when you went out to Rutgers, how do you think that may have set you up for success in providing you, some juxtaposition as far as regionally how the athletes would react and things when you were recruiting and coaching?
Well, you had to be very adaptable as a representative of the program you're recruiting toward. So that was a given, and you had to be able to help the athlete project. Hey, you're going to have a lot of great experiences when you come to Logan, Utah, or to New Brunswick, New Jersey. Selling the West Coast player to come all the way to the East Coast. And when we were at Utah State, for example, when Riggs played, our roster was littered with multiple geographical players that came from all over the country. And they came with a lot of different backgrounds. And that was probably the best challenge you could go through as a young coach, is to try to kind of mold all these different personalities and all these different backgrounds into one unit to play a season. And a lot of times we had the athletes for no more than 2 years, because players like Riggs would come from a junior college and play for 2 seasons and then move on with their careers. So I just reflect back and think that my experience at Utah State was truly the one opportunity that a young coach needed to experience and move on to his next opportunity, whether it be at Stanford or Cal or San Jose State or Rutgers. So, and in Lav's narration of recruiting to Logan, Utah, the drive from the airport to the actual campus was an hour and 45 minutes. Can you imagine, in this day of cell phones and social media, I don't even think a recruit could sit still for that long, And so we really were creative in establishing a trip from the airport to a campus, hour and 45 minutes, and try to make it seem like it was nothing, to a young man from California or from anywhere else in the country.
That's awesome. Craig, when you got there and really got, inculcated, if you will, that's an old Army term, but when you kind of got into the whole environment there at Utah State, what do you think it was about the environment and that coaching staff you've talked about so glowingly that gave you the foundation to want to eventually become a coach? And did you necessarily have inklings of being a coach when you walked onto campus out of Hartnell?
I always wanted to get into coaching, and one of the reasons, because I grew up very impoverished and really grew up with nothing. And I grew up really from 8th grade on my own. My brother and I lived in our own apartment in high school, and we didn't even have parents. And so the people that most affected me in my life were my coaches. And those are the ones that really helped me. And those are the ones, my high school coach, and then I went to community college. But when I got to Utah State, what was really awesome about those coaches is, one is they were all very young and they were all movers and shakers. As I look back now, they were all destined for great things, all of them. Every single coach we had went on to do some great things. But the biggest thing I think that I learned is that to be able to recruit to Utah State, like Terry said and Lav said, they had to sell themselves because they didn't have a tradition. They didn't, they hadn't won in a while. They weren't in a conference at that time. They got double transfers. Guy got kicked out of a school. You could bring them on. They wouldn't have to sit out a year. So we got quite a group of characters when that couple years that I was there. And what that helped me is it really helped me grow up, because I was 19 and I hadn't seen these older kids and pretty rough shot kids. And you either grew up or you left or you couldn't make it. So you had to do that. But just the coaches sold themselves. And I really trusted them when I went on that visit. And I'll never forget Lav and Gilby after the game. I went to the Utah game and it was snowing like a dog and we ended up losing and everybody was sad. And Gilby just finally said, "Hey man, look, we're going to beat these guys next year. And this is it. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You're going to come play for me and Lav, and that's it. If you want to do it, let's do it. If not, then, if we're not here, this is who we are." And I was pretty fired up when he said that. And like I said, both were young and really good. And then I learned so much just from how they did things. And it's really interesting. I've copied almost all of that in my coaching career. And I decided to go into community college coaching because I wanted to make a difference. And because of my background, I really felt that was my life's calling, to help these kids that didn't have a place out of high school, that couldn't do anything to get up. And I really molded my entire program after the Utah State program. I got very close with my players. I got really like a family group. And that's the way we were at Utah State, was a big family group, because we all lived in the dorm, 110 plus kids. Lav lived in the dorm with us. And so I molded a lot of that stuff, and our whole offense. I ran that whole multiple eye offense my whole time coaching, and it really worked out good. And I was able to, because of those coaches, were able to help me do what I had to do. I've been able to help thousands of now young kids get scholarships to the 4-year level. A lot of guys, and not just the NFL guys. I've coached a lot of them, a lot of CFL guys. But the really big impact is I've coached a lot of kids that wouldn't have got their degree if it would have been going to the community college route, in the way that we've helped them. Now they're successful businessmen, fathers, husbands. And now that you talk about generational changes, we've been able to make a lot of generational changes with some lower socioeconomic kids, and now they're doing very well. And it all started for me learning that goal at Utah State. Like I said, I helped Lav move into the dorm. I also helped him put it in his front lawn when he finally got to get out of there. Which is a funny story in itself. Him and Gilby lived right across the street from each other. And so Lav was just going to put in sod. So we went over there and we helped him. Gilby was too cheap and he wanted to spray it with some. And a month later, Lav had a beautiful lawn and Gilby was full of weeds and he was not very happy. But so that was how they took us under the wing. We got to go to their house and we hung out with them. We got to meet their families and stuff. And that's the way I operated my program for 37 years at Butte College. And so all the things that I learned, I paid it forward a bunch of times. And so for Terry and for Bill, if they've ever thought one time, did they ever make a difference in anybody's life, they're looking at a guy right here that made a huge difference. And then I was able to pay that forward a lot of times with a lot of our kids. So I think that's the important part of relationships and coaching, has been certainly for me.
Well, I'll tell you, it's come up more than once in the interviews I've done so far this year, as well as some of the ones we did for season 1 last year. And I know that, I asked Coach Bill Curry, how much of playing for Bobby Dodd was reflected in his coaching style. And he said, he saved my life. Every team I coached got a huge dose of Bobby Dodd. So, if I heard you right, Riggs, you're talking about, every team you probably had there and the relationships you made got a huge dose of Terry Shea and Bill Laveroni too. So that's awesome.
Gilbertson, those three, there's no question about it. I mean, I've said sayings. Everybody thinks that's my sayings a bunch of times, but everybody has to hear it sometime. You don't make up you make up very few things in your life. You hear it, you talk about it, you expound upon it. But absolutely, and I think that is the joy of coaching. To at the end of your day, know that you had a positive impact on these kids, and know that they're doing well because of some of the smaller things that you helped them with, and you just can't get a better job than that.
Yeah, Coach Shea, I want to, for the purpose of our listeners, I want to know I want to set this up a little bit before I ask the question. But you and Coach Lav were at Cal together initially when he was O-line coach and you were the offensive coordinator. Then you guys, not necessarily aligned perfectly year to year, but you guys were together at San Jose State. When you were the head coach and he was your O-line coach in the early 90s. And then during your tenure at Rutgers as the head coach from 96 to 2000, he was there as the O-line coach. So with that as kind of the context of the question, kind of articulate from your perspective why it's great within the coaching industry to develop those relationships and develop that trust and confidence that you have, whether it's an assistant coach or even a player you used to coach that you bring on, that makes, a contribution to success as you go through your career.
Well, John, and I know you've coached as well. I think every coach values loyalty more than any other quality that you can find in a fellow coach. And, to be alongside a coach like Bill Laveroni for the years that we were together, then I really think that, that loyalty factor carries it just carries with you from one stop to another. And so consequently, when I had the opportunity to become a head coach, I still remember moving on to San Jose State, and they hired me with 2 days remaining of spring practice. It was a very unique hire, and I had been at Cal Berkeley with Laveroni at the time. So then they allowed me to bring one coach onto the staff. I inherited the remaining coaching staff because their budget was so tight. And the one coach I picked was Bill Laveroni to come onto the staff, and it evolves directly back to loyalty, and which coaches are going to be there with you in spite of what the odds are or what the score is or what the scoreboard reads. And from that standpoint, I can't say enough about relationships and how coaches reach out to other coaches to bring them onto staffs because they've had previous experiences. You see that at every level. You can watch ESPN until the cows come home, and every hire is because this coach was connected to that coach, at the NFL level even. So I think relationships build a tremendous product for coaches who reach out and want to hire fellow coaches who are going to be not only hopefully bright. Here's a coach like Bill Laveroni who attended Cal Berkeley. You have to be bright to even get into that school, and so you just look for those kinds of qualities. But above all is the loyalty factor.
I think that's huge. I had talked to in a couple of the interviews where I was talking to coach and player with regard to the relationship. I've asked every time, ask the coach, how do you think coaching a great player? In the case of two of the interviews, the player was a Hall of Famer. Do you think that added to your career? And interestingly enough, similar to what you're talking about or in line with that, both answers were similar in that it certainly doesn't hurt your career to say, hey, I coached XYZ Hall of Famer. But every time you change jobs, especially unless you're the head coach, you still got to prove yourself. You still got to go back and earn your stripes, so to speak. So Coach Lav, when you were there, and interesting, when you were coaching with Seattle and came in as the assistant line coach, you were working with Tom Lovat, as I remember. It's been said that, they knew he was kind of going to retire. So you were, the coach in waiting, as it were, for taking over offensive line. How do you think those you don't necessarily see that happen, at least openly, a lot anymore. I mean, how did you value that in terms of that piece as relationships go?
Yeah. Obviously when I got hired, I didn't know what to expect. I had never been in the NFL before. And I wanted to make sure that I knew Tom Lavat's reputation, and I wanted to make sure that I went there and absorbed everything that I could absorb from him. I think it goes back to what Riggs was talking about when Riggs was a player and around us as coaches at Utah State, and he absorbed a lot of the coaching isms, whatever, and how we did things. So when I got to Seattle, I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sit in the back of this meeting room, and I still have the spiral notebook, and I would take down notes, how he talked to players. If he made a change in a position, he would bring both players in, the one that was going to get elevated to a position and the one that was going to get demoted. And he talked to both of them at the same time. I thought that was then there was no, how sometimes disgruntled players, when they get sent back to the second string or third string, they go, well, I didn't even get a chance, and they didn't give me this and they didn't do that. Well, Tom avoided all that. And Tom, to this day, my relationship with Tom Lovat, I love the guy. I learned so much from him. So those kinds of things, I just, I really valued. I value Tom Lovat, his relationship, because he treated me, you know how the NFL is a kind of a unique group, and sometimes those coaches that have been in there a long time, and when a new young guy comes in, now it's a little different nowadays because the NFL is all full of young guys, but in those days, there was an old guard, and then there guys like myself, and so. But Tom treated me with respect, and he and I would talk a lot before games, after games. We just learned so much, and ironically, he was the head coach at the University of Utah in his career way back when. But so that relationship was developed, and it really was developed because Tom, opened up himself to me and allowed me to just develop, at that level. And I learned a tremendous amount from that man. He was really a heck of a coach, and still a very good close friend.
I think that it's funny, you hear a lot of times when coaches speak about their premier athletes, one of the things you hear on a common basis is he was very coachable. He reached out. He wanted to be coached. He wanted to get better, even for guys that end up being Hall of Famers. Craig, when you at the community college level, when you would see a kid struggle and there was something that inside of them that you knew you could bring out, that there was some potential there that they could go bigger and better places. How did you approach that at that level versus some of the bells and whistles and incentives that you can offer at a larger school?
Well, I really think that our responsibility at community college was really first to guide the kids that we had in school first and make sure that they were doing okay. They were eating, they were living. And we took a family approach to all the kids that we had. And my philosophy was, our best kids or our worst kids, we were going to treat them all, not necessarily equal, but we were going to treat them all good. And they got treated very well. And one of the things I think with my background that really helped me deal with the community college level, because we deal with a lot of low socioeconomic kids, a lot of minority students, a lot of kids that didn't have the academic grades to go on to four-year school right at the time. And so every kid that I saw struggling, I kind of saw myself in them all. And our coaches used to almost laugh at me sometimes and go, Coach, when you get kicked off your team, you really had to do something bad. Because I tried to help everybody. I was going to save the world one kid at a time. And at the end of my rope, I think that I did a little bit of that, the best that I could. But our goal was to use football as a tool for our kids to get an education, to get socialized, to understand how they needed to act and live. So when they left our program, they could get a four-year degree, and then they could get out of their situation just like I did and become a producing, responsible adult. And I really think that a lot of these people throw a lot of money in colleges, even our community college, that, they're trying to change the statistics, they're trying to do equity, and they're trying to do all this stuff. And they don't really value athletics as much as they should, because we can tell you story after story and generational changes. Like, I'll give you Larry Allen example. He's one of the best offensive linemen in the history of the NFL. But when I got him, he had been stabbed at a basketball court when he was a freshman in high school and almost killed. And his mom had to get him out of Compton. She sent him to Napa, where I had a buddy that was the athletic director and one of the coaches, and he was been the principal. So he sent him up to my place, and we worked with him. He had low skills, but he worked hard and he was very smart. He was a very smart kid. He was a great athlete, but he was big and he was out of shape. So we got him to do those things. And we actually didn't even have a high school degree. So we got him a GED. We got him the classes he needed. And we really worked out. As a matter of fact, his last semester, he lived with me because he didn't have enough money and he was already done playing. So it wasn't illegal. I moved him into my house for the last 6 months. And he had a great mom. Vera was a great mom, but she was a single mom. She had 2 kids. It was sort of struggle for him all the time. She used to send him $20 to Western Union when I think it cost $30 to send it. And so now you talk about, because of what we were able to do, and we were able to get him going in football and send him to Sonoma State because he couldn't go Division I because he didn't have the grades because he didn't graduate from high school. So I actually drove him down to a very good friend of mine who was the offensive line coach. So I said, you got to take care of this like he's your own kid. And so he did that. And so now you flash forward so many years, and Larry became one of the best players and made a lot of money. He's been really good with his money. And his oldest son, or his only son, went to De La Salle private school, and he went to Harvard, and he graduated from Harvard 3 years ago.
Wow.
And you talk about a generational change, 1 year removed from Larry getting stabbed in the ghetto in Compton to his kids now, and his 2 daughters went to Ivy League schools also, but his son graduated from Harvard. That is the story of generational changes. And that's
Absolutely
what all of the coaches have been able to do with a lot of kids. And so, and not just him, but I think that's such a great story. But we've had a lot of success stories at Butte College that I've been able to be around. And it's just so fulfilling to be able to see that. And now Larry's son's kids, they're not even going to think about if they're going to go to school. It's just when and where. And they're not going to get stabbed in the playground. Their whole family, the Allen family, is now on a whole paradigm shift. They're on a whole different trajectory in life, and they're going to be producers and givers instead of takers. And I think that's one of the best things that we could do. And that's why I said I try to change the world one kid at a time. And that was certainly one kid that we're able to change that paradigm shift for him.
I'd be interested to know, Coach Lav and Coach Shea, both of you, from your experiences in your time in the NFL, and you guys were certainly coaching in the NFL during the same window of time, albeit with different teams. How do you see and it's shifting away from relationships just a little bit, but in terms of your experience from starting where you did and kind of the small school West Coast football, and then coaching for 6 and 8 years respectively in the NFL, how do you see the changes in the athletes from the time that, back in the day and guys coming into the league, and then what you see now, which is obviously generationally is a little bit different attitude toward things. Coach Shea, if you don't mind, I'll let you start.
Well, among your 3 guests that are on the show today, all 3 of us started our coaching careers at the probably at as low a level as you could imagine. Bill Laveroni started at the high school level. Both Riggs and I started at the community college level. And so you really learned, if you learned anything, it was your ability to teach. And that carried with you throughout your coaching career, in my opinion. So when you get to the NFL level, the one thing I learned very early on, and that was, if the NFL player believed that you as his coach could help him get better and improve his skills, then he would listen to you and he would be coachable. If they ever got to that point where they believed that you could not help them in that vein, then you had a real struggle on your hand, and you were coaching almost into two deaf ears, and that has not changed in the NFL. Even the young players who come into the league today, as compared to the veterans of today, they're still in search of being coached if they can improve their game and improve their skills accordingly. And that's what you as a coach has to prove to that player who happens to wear an NFL helmet. And to me, that's the essence of coaching in the NFL.
Coach Lav, what do you think? There's a lot of different styles of coach. You hear people say, "Oh, he's a player's coach." Do you think that, in line with what Coach Shea was saying, do you think that there's more or less of a tendency at the NFL level versus college, where in some cases in the NFL, coach may be much closer to the same ages as players, given their time and tenure, to be where a coach has to be more vulnerable, has to be more open in order to earn that trust and respect as far as the relationship goes? Or did you see successful coaches in your tenure there where, it was, hey, my way or the highway kind of thing?
I think the key word that you mentioned briefly, and it's probably the most important at that level, is trust. And Terry mentioned, the players has to trust that you have their best interest. So that part really doesn't change no matter what level of coaching you're at. The trust at the NFL level is that the player trusts that you're going to help them become a better player, and that they will be able to perform and have a long career in the NFL. If that trust is not there or broken, then it will not work. And one of my mentors that we lost this year, Howard Mudd, who it was just a tremendous. He really helped me a lot. But Howard made a great statement to me when I first started in the NFL. He said, "Bill, remember that your players have a lot of football knowledge in their background. A lot of them played Pop Warner football. They played high school football. They played college football. So you're talking maybe 15 to 20 years of football." So he said, "I always listened to my players if they had suggestions." I think I tried to, I think he created an atmosphere where it wasn't, live my way or the highway. Yes, I will make the ultimate decisions when it comes right down to doing that. But also I want to hear, can we do this? Do you believe this is the right way to go? Some players would may differ with what your plan was. But then you come to a consensus, and then finally, the coach has to make the final decision. So the two areas that I loved when I was in the back of the room listening to Tom Lovat, if we were putting a game plan in or listening to, I was amazed at the players, how diligent they were, how specific they were of writing down the game plan, writing in their spiral notebooks, asking questions. I marveled at that, and I said, I wish college football players, when they would get in their meetings, could see what goes in a professional meeting. So often people think that these professional players just roll out their helmets because they are great athletes. The ones that last the longest, and I'm talking even Walter Jones, a Hall of Famer, they would take down notes, they would ask questions, they would be very specific about what their job was, what their role was, and I really enjoyed that part of it. And I enjoyed my meetings, with the players and even the quarterbacks, having a quarterback meeting and talk about protections and how much input they would give in. And you'd say, wow, this is really cool. I mean, it's so that to me was the biggest difference. The relationships were still there. I've had great relationship this past year with Matt talking to me and Steve Hutchinson and all those guys. So there still is a relationship that goes on there. There still is a bond that goes on. We went through a lot, and I know every coach goes through with his players, but trust to me is a key word, and with trust becomes loyalty. And I think that they work hand in hand. And with Coach Shea, that's one of his greatest qualities as a leader is you trusted Coach Shea because you knew he had your back and you were going to have his back because of the way he led the team and led our staffs.
Well, you've all talked about different aspects of leadership, and I think that I've said it many times, and probably people that watch these episodes get tired of hearing me say it, but so much of the foundation that I came into the Army with in 1982 and served me well for 23 years was what I learned playing high school and college football. And there are a number of life lessons, life skills that I think you pick up in the locker room, in the huddle, on the field, that kids that don't play team sports and even ones that play something other than football miss out on. And I think a lot of it has to do with great coaches. And there are a number of factors nowadays, and this kind of segues into my next question. And I'll kind of start to kind of wrap things up here a little bit. It was an interesting comment. I asked Anthony Munoz how things had changed from the time he played to now. And his first comment was, he said, you just don't, I was with the Cincinnati Bengals for 13 years and I had one line coach, Jim McNally. He said, you don't see that anymore. A guy could have a 10-year career and have 5 different line coaches or running back coaches or quarterback coaches. And I think that there are a lot of factors that lead into that. Coach Lav, you mentioned a minute ago, so many of the younger coaches coming into the league now. But there's something that started out on the West Coast, God bless California, called NIL, name, image, and likeness, that is looming on the horizon as a thorn in the side of the NCAA. And in some cases, I presume some college coaches probably view it as such, because you've got COVID going on that has changed the regs as far as guys getting basically a free year. You've got the transfer portal now that's influenced by that. And now you've got this thing looming on the horizon that says kids are going to be able to no longer be held to an amateur status, but be able to make money off their name, image, and likeness. How do you guys think? And I'll Coach Rigsbee, I'll be interested in, if you don't mind leading off this, as far as from your perspective, particularly at the level you coach for so long. How do you guys see this affecting things like recruiting and relationships in the locker room between players as well as players and coaches?
Well, I'm actually very disappointed that this is going on right now in athletics in general. I mean, I think as we've moved on in the last 20, 25 years, a lot of the players have devalued their educational experience, and they've devalued, a lot of these kids, I want to play in the pros, a degree, all they're giving me is a degree. All they're giving me is a chance for an education. Well, I think that is paramount, because I don't care how much money you have, if you don't know how to live life in a positive way. And that's what going to college and getting a degree does. Not necessarily going to make you a lot more money, but it's going to help you hang on to the money you have. It's going to help you do those things. And I just think this is going to be a nightmare. I just really, not so much at the community college level, because we have things in place where, like at our community college in California, is non-scholarship. So you can't give them anything. You can't give them any inducements to go there. And we talked about recruiting, how hard it was. I mean, you really had to sell yourself, because we couldn't give them a dime, can't pay for anything, just get them a job and financial aid. But I think this is really going to interfere with a lot of the basic premise that the whole student athlete was based on. And now I could see Southern California, if they're trying to get a quarterback at USC, they say, well, we'll give you $1 million car contract with your name. You can go down and be the spokesman for this big car company, and you'll get $1 million to do it. And then to other teams may not be able to do that. And so I just think, again, they're devaluing the educational experience, and they're devaluing what college was meant to be and go and experience. And, people leaving early and doing this and doing that. I think there's something, in my opinion, to say about staying and getting a degree and experience the college life. And yeah, if you can make as much money as you can, you should, but you need to know how to live to be able to keep that money and to be able to survive way after your playing days are over. And believe me, everybody's playing day is going to come to an end much sooner than they think, and they don't think so, but it is. So that's where I'm at with it, and I'm kind of saddened by it. But I'm a realist, and I know that's going to happen. So you're just going to have to get in and do the best. Coaches are going to do the best they can with it.
Yeah, Coach Shea, what are your feelings on it?
I think the unknown is pretty scary, and in college athletics, the athlete learns about time management. He learns about relationships, friendships. He learns about respect of the process. And I think there are so many unknowns with what's coming down the pike here with this question that you posed, that I think it's going to be something that you're going to see a lot of mistakes made and attempted to be corrected. And you have the cycle probably going in and out faster than you can even imagine. So I would imagine with this change will come all kinds of counter moves and misunderstandings. And I think eventually somebody with some strength, some organization or a body of people have got to be able to stand up and right the ship if it becomes such that things are just so unfair, and that's where this could lead to, and that's my concern.
Yeah. Coach Lav, thinking back to that comment you made about the trip from the airport to the campus and the recruiting van, how do you think it affects those kind of situations and makes it really increases the difficulty level for coaches trying to recruit, particularly at smaller schools?
I'm not a big fan of what's happening with the NCAA. I think let's all face reality. It's all about the money, and unfortunately, if you eliminate the Big Five conferences and then all the other Division 1A school colleges, let's say, this inequity financially of trying to pay players another amount of stipend. I understand the problem with the athletes that come from a low socioeconomic situation. I think that that needs to be addressed. The problem is, I think there's an inequity in resources. Notre Dame's resources are a lot different than San Jose State's resources, and Sacramento State's resources are different than Georgia's. So to me, I think that NCAA, I don't know if they're going to be strong enough to do it, but I think there should be two sets of rules and regulations that benefit those universities, the diversity of the resources of a Big Five as opposed to those other universities, so that they can help the athletes, but at the same time not be at a disadvantage. I think is really the biggest thing. And the thing that bothers me lately has been this transfer portal deal. To me, the university commits a scholarship to a young man. I think there should be a commitment on the other side from the athlete that he should be committed to the university and play his career at that university. So often nowadays people say, well, if you don't like it, it's difficult, go ahead and make a change. That's okay. It's no big deal. Go to another school. I think that's really teaching our young people the wrong thing. I really think we're losing that part of it. And, all three of us have been in situations. We go to a college and we had to work to get on the field, and that's really the goal, is get on the field and be a participant. And nowadays, the young people, if it gets difficult and they just say, well, I don't think I'm going to get on the field, so I'll leave. I'm going to go somewhere else where I can play. I'm worried about that.
Yeah. I see it being an issue on a couple of different levels. Coach Shea, do you want to add something?
Not at all, but I sure appreciate what Coach Laveroni was mentioning about how easy the trigger is pulled to change the direction of your career with this transfer portal or even the graduate transfer. I mean, even that's being taken advantage of, and it just seems like whenever there's a loophole, the college culture will find a way to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and you've seen so much evidence of that starting. Yeah, even starting with oh my goodness, his name just flew right out of my head. Russell, quarterback for the Seahawks right now. When he transferred after I think it was from Wisconsin, and I mean, there's been multiple different, Jalen Hurts, there's been all kinds of guys. I should have a laundry list, as many as have done it in the last few years. I want to wrap up with it goes back to the theme of relationships, but it's much more about how you gentlemen have each internalized what you've gone through in your career. As Coach Shea, you articulated a minute ago, each one of you starting at what would be perceived as a lower level of coaching. But Craig, if you don't mind, I'll let you lead off. If you were sitting across from a young kid, and I would presume, Riggs, you have fairly recently, at least in your role as an AD, but if you're sitting across from a kid and you're really trying to portray or articulate what football and the relationships and the experiences have meant to you and why it's valuable to them to stay in the game and take advantage of it, what would you say to that young man?
Well, I would first of all talk to him about, you learn so many skills in being a part of a team. Your affiliation needs are met. You meet so many guys that are really have great spirits, that are really fighting for the same cause. We talk about when all the unrest was going on with Black Lives Matter and different things. So we just I had a lot of my African-American or Black kids call me and like, Coach, you okay? Everything's cool. And I go, yeah, everything's great with me, because I had such a good rapport with them. And we always used to talk, wouldn't it be great if America could just be a locker room? I mean, we had so many kids from different religions and different ethnic groups and different views on life. But I'm telling you, when you strap it up to go play for a championship, like we did just about every single season that I coached, we were together. We were a family unit. We were a group. We were into each other. And it's really been interesting with the community college that I was at. I couldn't tell you how many of those kids have called me back and said, Coach, the best time I ever had in football was at Butte Community College. I mean, I talked to Aaron Rodgers. I talked to Larry Allen. I talked to hundreds of kids that have played Division I all over the country. We sent thousands of kids to Division I's in the NFL and the CFL. So I would tell them that I still tell them all the time. We just had our Hall of Fame. We had to do it, through a Zoom call 2 weeks ago, or my last thing at the college we put in some Hall of Fame kids. But I would tell them that it's so important to learn how to push yourself to the limit, learn how not to quit, like Lavin was saying before, learn how to fight through some things. Instead of just quitting, learn how to compete. And at Utah State, when I was there, we talked about two things all the time: compete, and finish. That's the one thing that I talk about in life. And I do a lot of public speaking. The biggest thing I tell kids is you have to learn how to finish. I mean, we used to get yelled at if our hand was not behind the line, or if we didn't run through the line. And then those are good microcosms for life. You got to start with your hand behind the line. You got to finish through the line. So those are the things that I would tell kids. And I've told kids, I just had a conversation with Aaron Rodgers, right when I retired, and we laughed and we talked about the same things that I talked about when he was playing for me, and they were talking about the same things now. He's been in the league 17 years. He's one of the best players in history of the NFL. So those are things that I think are so important for these young athletes to be able to do. And like you in the military, you learn football that helped your military. I mean, I've got kids that are Navy SEALs. I got a kid that's the commander of Team 1 in San Diego. He's the commander of the base. He started his whole thing at Butte College. He tells me all the time, if I could get through the conditioning in Butte College, I got through the SEALs. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So it's been fortunate for me. I've had thousands of kids like my own sons, and the relationships I've built. And again, the last thing to wrap up my part of it is I owe it all to the coaches at Utah State. And I owe it to my high school coach, my community college coach, but the coach at Utah State, how they influenced me. And they probably didn't even know they were influencing me at the time. Probably had no idea. I'm just one of a bunch of different guys that they coached. But I listened to what they said, and I was able to carve out a pretty darn good life for myself. In my family, both my kids went to Cal. One of my sons played in the NFL. They're both very successful businessmen. And again, my paradigm shift has changed because of football and because of relationships.
Awesome. How about you, Coach Lav? What might you offer to a young man with regard to the value of the football and what he learns in that environment?
Those words that we've talked about earlier, and I think I'd look him in the eye and I'd probably ask him if he could define what discipline is, what trust is, what loyalty, what does that mean to you? What are those, what does a schedule mean to you? And I'm sure they couldn't respond to it. And that would be how I think I would talk to him. My sister-in-law has has an 8th grader, and I'm waiting for the right moment to talk to him about some of those things, because those are the things that I think that are really a part of our game. I mean, what Riggs just talked about, hand behind the line. I'm helping a high school up in Bothell, Washington, and that we're running. That's the first thing I'm saying, and I'm saying finish. so here it is, 50 years late. I started my coaching career in '70, and I'm still saying finish, and I'm still saying get your hand behind the line, start it the right way. So those are things that when you have some brain in your body, and it's made an imprint in your body. I had a high school coach who was just a wild man, who Coach Shea. He coached an all-star game when Coach Shea was the quarterback from Bellarmine High School, and there were things he would do that some of the things you couldn't do nowadays as a coach. But you cracked me up when you said, my mom said, "Hey, I'm going to take you to the doctor one time." And when I was like a sophomore, I said, "No, Mom, I'm going to go talk to Coach Tringali first before you send me to the doctor, because he always wants to know, what doctor I'm going to." So those are things those are life lessons. You hope you can impart on young people, and like Riggs said, and Riggs has made such a great impression with players for so long. Those things last a lifetime, and I don't know if a stockbroker or a lawyer can say that with in his business field. So trust, loyalty, discipline, confidence, laugh, smile, even when you're working hard. I love kidding those. I used to kid those guys. When I was at Sacramento State, I coached 3 years there. They thought I was out of my mind at times. But great relationships.
Well, Coach Shea, you've had after coaching or during coaching, I should say, counting the spring league, but you've had the opportunity to train a lot of guys. I mean, Robert Griffin, Blaine Gabbert, Matthew Stafford. You're looking at a 10 or 12-year-old junior high, or maybe a 15-year-old high school kid that's in their shoes. What, based on your experience and those successes of those players you've had a chance to mentor, what would you tell them?
There's no doubt in my mind that I would encourage each and every one of those young athletes, as well as the names you just rolled off. And I would make sure they understood how important it was for them to value being a great teammate. And to me, if you are a great teammate, that means you have the welfare of each and every one of those players in the locker room. You have the ability to make sure that you're there for them. And in fact, John, I've said often, if more of our crazy politicians out in the world had ever been inside a locker room for any amount of time, maybe they'd be a better leader. And I think with being a great teammate comes leadership, and consequently, if you can draw from those qualities in the game that we love so much, you're on the right track. And I'll just close by, to be a great teammate, you got to have an attitude, and an attitude that permeates the positiveness of why you're part of that team. And I often tell my guys, your eyes are the window to your attitude, and you better make sure that you listen with your eyes, and you watch things with your eyes, and that you take care of your teammate with your eyes. And it takes very little skill, but it takes a lot of strength and a lot of leadership to be a great teammate. And to me, that's what makes the difference of a good team versus an average team.
That's awesome. Great advice on all three counts. Well, Coach Craig Rigsbee, Coach Terry Shea, Coach Bill Laveroni, I can't tell you enough. I've actually let this run on, and I could go another hour, but I've actually let it run on a little longer than I normally try to, not only because of the relationship between the three of you, but the common grounds that you've covered throughout this chat that we've had. And you've really blessed us with taking your time to be here and sharing your experiences. And from me to you, thank you sincerely for all our watchers and listeners, to all three of you for being here today.
My pleasure, John.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Great.
I am extremely impressed with Coach Lav's beard. The goatee is definitely becoming. I love it. I think it looks great. I think now
John, it's a professorial look.
There you go. There you go.
So that's,
yeah. And now that I've actually had a chance to meet and see Coach Shea in person and talk to him, when you talk about, I started in the open about 50 plus or, plus years of coaching. I say, he must've started as young as he looks. He started coaching when he came out of the womb, I think, so.
Yeah. John, are we off? We're off.
No, I'm still, I was just going to say, I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye and go ahead and stop the recording. So thanks again, gentlemen.